Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Tampa Bay Real Producers. This, of course, is the podcast made for real producers, by real producers, and with none other than Tampa Bay's real producers. So we get to hang out today with Mr. Eric Dungy. Good
Awesome.
to see you, bro.
Thanks for having me, Don. I'm excited to be on here, so excited to talk about it. Like you said, offline, nothing's off limits, so we're going to get into it.
Nothing's off limits, man. We're going to dive into everything here. So I'm excited to dive into your story a little bit more. Many of you probably know Eric, and we've featured him in the past. He was one of our cover spotlights.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I was looking at an old video at that little event that we had up at that house up in, I think it was in Starkey Ranch.
Yep.
And that was over a year ago already, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy how time flies. I mean, that feels like that was just a couple of weeks ago, but it was almost a year ago, like you said.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just, especially in this industry, time just goes by so quick. So,
Yeah.
I'm glad to be back, though.
Yeah, no doubt. It was a fun little hangout. It was at a beautiful house. Shout out to Annie Rocks. I think that was her listing or something up there. And that's where we actually had a chance to meet finally. But
Yeah.
today we get to dive into your story a little bit more because I know when you did the magazine, I think you were hooked up with one of our writers and all that kind of thing. So now I get to dive in a little deeper, man. I don't hold any questions back, so this will be fun.
Well, let's go, man. Shoot away.
Here we go. So, Eric, let's just get started a little bit, I guess, with your background. I mean, obviously growing up in Tampa Bay, and you have a pretty famous last name, and so people, I'm sure, think they know a little bit about your family and all that. So I would love to hear from your perspective, like, you know, growing up in Tampa Bay, what was that like for you growing up in a public family, right? A public name, public environment, knowing what that must have been like as a kid. I'm sure had its positive things and maybe not so positive things. So I'd like to talk a little bit about your upbringing in the area, and then eventually how you got yourself involved in this whole real estate thing, right? Like, where did that lead to become where real estate became interesting to you? Yeah,
no, I was very fortunate to have a very unique and awesome upbringing. Some challenges associated with that, but mostly just really great. And especially to do it here in Tampa, you know, ever since we moved here, I think it was 1996, you know, the city's really kind of got behind the Bucks at the time, and just my family in general supported us. Challenging elements were just you know, as a child, trying to figure out who your real friends are, things like that. Sometimes just not having a lack of privacy. But overall, just really fortunate to live in a beautiful city that's we've kind of grown up with Tampa over the last 25 years or so. We've seen Tampa grow and mature as we've grown as a family, and I've grown as a person. So it's been a really cool journey and really cool just place to do it and a place to grow in.
Now, you weren't born here, right? Or were you?
No, correct. I was born in Overland Park, Kansas, outside of Kansas City.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And your dad was a coach, an assistant coach with the Chiefs at the time?
Yeah, Chiefs. Okay. And then I moved to Minnesota shortly after that. Have no memories of Kansas. Lived there for about 4 years, and then moved to Tampa. And then lived in Indy for a few years as well. Moved back to Tampa. And so, like, throughout that whole journey, I kind of was, feeling a little nomadic or, feeling like a place with a rebel without a home, so to speak. But then just as I've gotten older, I can really look back at Tampa and say, like, yep, that's really where I was raised. And, like, that's where my formative years were at. And, like, really, this is home to me.
How old were you when you guys moved to Tampa?
I was 4 years old when we first moved here.
You were? Okay. So you don't even remember too much then about Indy probably, right?
No, I moved to Indy in middle school, and I moved back to Tampa again. So I moved to Indy after my fifth grade, one of those two, and then came back in the middle of my 10th grade year. And then
that's right, because your dad was coach here, and then he went to Indy.
Yep. So,
and then you came back. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Found a funny story about that. My dad had planned to retire when I moved back, so I moved back to Tampa, enrolled in plant, was like ready to go. The whole family was going to be in Tampa, like kind of happily ever after. And Mr. Irsay, the owner of the Colts at the time, was like, Coach, like, we got to have you back one more year. And he's like, my son's already in school. Like, I can't do it. And he's like, all right, we'll make you an offer we can't refuse. Like, how about you can use the team plane. You can fly down to watch your son play, fly back and coach. Like, it was one of those things. So it was a funny year, but, that's just how much love, Mr. Irsay in Indianapolis also had for my dad, which is really cool. Sure. And they were opening a new stadium at the time, and he felt like my dad deserved to kind of usher that stadium in, too. So that was just a really cool kind of moment and kind of just a fun story as I moved back to Tampa. My dad was like, well, actually, plans change, but also come to your games. I'll still be there for dinner and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge sports fan. I grew up loving baseball was my number one sport, but I became a rabid football fan in 1986 when the Giants won the Super Bowl.
Okay,
right?
yep.
So I grew up in the New York area. And I became a fan, like I said, when LT and Phil Simms were dominating the Broncos in Super Bowl 21. So that was like my...
Was that in Tampa?
No, that game was actually in California.
Okay, yep, that's right. Yeah,
they won. They did win their 1990 Super Bowl here, though.
Okay, that's
in Tampa.
right.
They beat the Bills 20-19. Scott Norwood, wide right, baby, wide right. So I'll never forget those early moments growing up. But you hear so much about how committed the coaches have to be, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a 100-hour-a-week plus type of a commitment, and you have to imagine that's got to be tough on the families to be able to not really ever be home, right? I'm assuming you probably didn't see your dad that much.
It could have been very tough, and it wasn't necessarily easy. But like, what I really appreciate about my dad is like he really like went out of his way to include our family as much as possible. Like you hear different stories about like coaches that are like, oh yeah, I'm up at 4:00 in the morning and watching film. My dad took me to school every day, so like school doesn't start till like 7:30, 8 o'clock. So like, he wasn't starting to work until after he dropped me off from school, and like. I credit that time, like those 20 minutes, 30 minutes in the car every day with each other from age 5 to age 16 or whatever it was. Like that time was super valuable just for us to have that bonding time, and also for him just to kind of set the tone of like, yeah, football is important. And I am putting a lot of hours in, but like not to the detriment of my family. And so like for the most part, he never missed games. He always figured out a way to work the schedule around. In the one time that he couldn't go to a game, I think I had like an 8th grade football game, and it was like on a maybe a Wednesday night or Thursday. He couldn't make the game for whatever reason. He sent Peyton Manning, Edgerrin James, and Marvin Harrison to come watch the game. So like, what I mean? Like, so he really like, it wasn't like I was like, oh, my
teammates must have been flipping out, right?
It was cool. Yeah, I was in like 8th grade, and like coach was like, no, keep your head in the game. Like, don't they're on the sidelines. Or whatever. Like, nah, focus on the field. So. But like I say, I was to say, there's like, yeah, like he wasn't necessarily like like a typical 9 to 5 where he was home for dinner every day or anything like that. But like he went out of his way to carve out family time and to make me feel valued and special and loved. So I don't have any regrets about how all that played out.
That's awesome. And did you? Obviously, you had your mom there as well at home, and you guys must have been pretty close too. Knowing that, was she kind of locking down the home while Dad was away?
Absolutely, yeah. I definitely have a lot of respect for my mom, just what she was kind of able to do, just kind of keeping the home intact. And one of my best friends, he's a sports agent, or his dad's a sports agent. He's a sports agent now too, but his dad was a sports agent, and so similar kind of lifestyles we both grew up in. Mm-hmm. And I really credit the fact that like some days I'd go to work with my dad and be around a bunch of men and interact with like all men and kind of live that life. And then the next day I'd be with my mom and we'd be going grocery shopping and going to book club and Bible study and like whatever else. And so like I really feel like I'm able to like relate to women, to men, to older people, younger people, just because like I had both my parents at the same time. Sometimes I'd be doing the dad day, doing football. Sometimes I'd be doing mom day. I'd be doing errands. Some days it'd be both. And so I just have like that diverse kind of, just upbringing. So I really kind of appreciate all like the ways I grew up.
Yeah, man, that's really cool. So when you kind of settled in here to Tampa, right, which I think you said you were 4 when you first came here and then left and then came back. It was 14 that you came back?
I was 16, about to be 16.
Okay, and now you started playing football at what age?
Funny, my first time on a football team was in 3rd grade, and I sucked. And I quit the team.
It wasn't for you, huh?
Yeah. But honestly, too, like, my dad was like...
I don't know why my dad loves this stuff. It sucks.
Like, it was just like, I loved, like, playing in the yard and throwing the ball around, but then we put the pads on, and it was hot, and I was soft, and I didn't like it. And the coaches were hard on us, but, like, my dad was like, hey, if you're not having fun, like...
Right.
Like, I'm not going to make you play football.
So that's kind of cool. He never pressured you to stay into it or get into it. Yeah.
So I played on the Northside Dolphins for like a half of the season in 3rd grade. And then I quit the team. And then I started playing again in middle school. I played at Berkeley for a year in 6th grade. And then I went to Indiana and played at that school's team. I didn't really get good until like 7th or 8th grade. Then I started kind of like, I don't know, growing up a little bit and kind of wasn't so soft.
Right. Did you play other sports too or just football?
Yeah, no. Played other sports. Basketball, track, baseball. Especially when I lived in Indiana, basketball is huge there. So I kind of got into basketball a little bit. Couldn't use my left hand, so I never had a chance. But I enjoyed playing. I loved baseball too. So I loved all sports. Still enjoy watching them and stuff like that.
Yeah. Was football eventually became your favorite?
Yeah. Even like when I played other sports, football just kind of had my heart. Though I always dreamed of going to the NFL and being a wide receiver. And even though I didn't necessarily do that, like that was always just like in my mind. And that's like even when I was playing basketball, it's like, all right, I'm playing basketball, but like come fall, like football is back on. Or like it was always like football is my biggest love.
Yeah, that's cool. And so, how old were you the year your dad won the Super Bowl?
That was my freshman year in high school, so I was 14. Maybe just turned 15 because it was in February that year.
So I'm assuming you were there.
Yeah, I was there. Yeah, absolutely. I can still remember just like that whole week, really the Super Bowl week, but especially that weekend. Going back to like there's the team hotel that you stay at all week, but then like the night before the game, there's like a secret hotel.
Yeah.
Because it's like, they don't want people, whatever. So I remember like going to the secret hotel where like literally nobody knew where it was at, and it was just like just the team, and I felt like I was part of the team at the time.
Yep.
So like I remember that night like being in the hotel and hanging out with the guys, like the pregame speeches and all that stuff.
So you were in the locker room with them.
Oh yeah. And then I remember to this day, like I get goosebumps thinking about it, being in the tunnle coming out like before the intros, because you can just feel all the
energy,
tension, the energy. Like this is, there's 50 guys in there that have been waiting their whole life for that moment.
Sure.
You can literally feel all this collective energy, and they're in the tunnel. They're all kind of clubbed together, and the guy's like, "All right, not yet, like before they can run out."
Just holding back a bunch of cage lions.
Yeah, and
right?
so like I remember that feeling, and I was like, "Man, I will never forget that feeling." And then, the start of the game, Devin Hester run the kickoff back and being like, "Oh, okay, like not quite how
time to play football now." Yeah,
yeah, like all right, like I've been waiting my dad's been waiting his whole career for this, and I've been waiting, my whole life, and then this doesn't look great, but then just obviously how that game played out, and like. Yeah, I remember that whole day, and I'll never forget it.
Yeah, dude, that was. I remember that game. It was raining, right? That whole day was a rainy day.
First time it ever rained during the Super Bowl. We were like, man, like never rains on Super Bowl Sunday.
Right.
Like, it's like a holiday. Like, you can't, but.
Thankfully, it was in Miami, so it wasn't cold or anything. Right. It was wet for sure.
Yeah.
And so it was a huge victory. I remember pulling for you guys. I didn't know you obviously at the time at all, but I liked your dad. I was rooting for him. I always had a respect for him because of his boldness about his faith.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And the fact that he was willing to talk about it publicly. And, I think many people out there aren't,
right.
and he's never really held back in that way. And so I've always been impressed by him because of that. So I remember pulling for you guys for that Super Bowl. I've never been a Colts fan, but
sure.
that day I was a Colts fan.
Yeah,
so.
No, I appreciate that. And I've heard that from many different people, which is really humbling and awesome to hear. So I appreciate just that support from afar. Like we felt that definitely during that time.
No doubt. And I'm assuming after the game when they finally won, that must have been some party in the locker room, huh?
Yeah, it was super cool. It was kind of almost, I wouldn't say anticlimactic, but the funniest kind of ironic part is like you always dream of like that, the clock winds down, you run on the field. There's so many security guards that you couldn't really, like you were kind of just stuck in this like, they had all their arms up, like, trying to protect people from the podium and stuff like that. So it was like, it was kind of like, oh, okay, we're just kind of stuck here for a little bit. Like, but then afterwards, like, going to the locker room, we have a cool family picture of us, like in the coach's locker room with just like my siblings and the trophy and stuff like that. And then like kind of a cool thing is somehow we ended up with a trophy that night, like in our hotel room. And we like the next day on the plane back, like I had the trophy up until that point, and I was like, all right, somebody else probably should take this. Like we were like coming out the plane, and like I think I gave it to either Mr. Polian, the general manager, or Peyton, or somebody. I was like, all right, somebody else who actually earned this can probably take it for now. Yeah. Like it was cool that I got to hang on.
Coach's son is running around with a trophy the whole time. All the players are like, can I touch that?
Right. After a certain point, it's like, all right, like okay, I'll give it up.
Right. Now, did you grow up with brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I grew up with a brother and a sister, and then we kind of started adding to our family. Jordan was born when I was about 8 or 9, and then now we're 10, 11 deep.
You guys have 11 siblings now?
Yes.
Wow. So you've stayed in the Tampa area, these years since then, right? You didn't leave again. You've grown up here since like 16, you said, right?
So I went to the University of Oregon for college.
Okay.
I went out there for 4 years. Kind of got to see the West Coast, got to see the Northwest, and then after graduating from Oregon, came back to USF and.
Did you play football there?
Yeah, I played football at Oregon.
Okay.
Had an awesome run there, and then came back and played a 5th year of football at USF, and kind of brought me back home. And then since then I've been in Tampa, kind of here, and I'm here for good now.
Cool. So when you were playing ball at college, did you think the NFL was the next step?
I mean, that's the goal. Maybe like looking back, it probably wasn't realistic, but like that certainly was like always my intentions. And like ever since every level of football I played on, I've always had that kind of big picture like goal of like I did want to go to the NFL. Like I was around it, and I knew what it looked like, and I wanted that for myself. Somewhere around, late in college, I kind of started seeing the writing on the wall and kind of starting to realize it wasn't going to happen. But like that was always my goal and my dream for sure.
And what made you realize it wasn't going to happen? You just felt like, were you not getting playing time?
Yeah, you kind of start doing the math in your head, and you're like, all right, like I'm a junior, not quite playing as much as I want to. Amari Cooper's a sophomore at Alabama, and he's got 20 touchdowns. I'm like, I
need another game plan, huh?
Yeah, I'm like, it's not looking good. Even then, I'm like, all right, like, I'll go to USF my 5th year, like, need a change of scenery, but like, kind of deep down, I'm like, it's not looking good for me.
Was that hard to deal with?
Oh yeah, it was really difficult. I was in love with football. Like I was obsessed with it. I watched film. I watched all levels of football all the time. Watched all the shows, NFL Network, this and that. And then to kind of see like it's not going to happen, like it was really disappointing and really hard to accept. And it took me a couple years to kind of just kind of snap out of that funk. But it was really difficult.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Especially, I would imagine still like with a famous last name, like. It's almost like there's an expectation, right? That people, if you are going down that path and you're going to be, because your dad played football, right?
Right, yep.
I don't know if people knew that, but he played for the Steelers, I think, didn't he?
Absolutely, yeah.
I read a couple of his books that he wrote, and he obviously had before he became a famous coach, he was a player, himself, and so. Not that he would put the pressure on you, but there's almost like this feeling like, oh, of course Eric is going to follow in those footsteps and become an NFL player himself. And then you're that close. You're playing high-level D1 football. Oregon is a great school, right?
Right.
And then not getting the shot, whether you felt like that was justified or not, as far as playing time goes. At the time, maybe you might have felt differently about, hey, I should be playing more. Or did you kind of accept these guys are just playing better than me and it is what it is? Like, is that kind of how it happened?
Like going back to the pressure, like there probably was outside expectations or whatever, but like truthfully, like the biggest pressure was that I placed on myself. Yeah. And looking back, I wish I would have been a little bit more compassionate on myself, but like, it's and ironically, I see my younger brother who's starting. He has his first game of his senior year tonight at Carrollwood Day. I see him doing some of the same stuff where I'm like, man, like relax, bro, enjoy it, like have fun with it. But like,
are you the oldest?
I have an older brother and older sister.
Okay.
So, like when you're in it, like it's just hard to give yourself that grace. But yeah, I was put a lot of pressure on myself. I wanted to, spite my haters, so to speak, and prove to them that I'm more than just my dad's son. I'm my own person. I'm going to stand on my own name and all this stuff. So I put a lot of pressure on myself. And, up until that point, I was always able to deliver. I was a very good high school player. We won state championships. I got recruited to Oregon, went to D1, all this stuff. So like up until that point, I was able to kind of like, see, I can do it. And then you get to college and like, I felt like it was one of those things where I was always realistic. Like, yeah, I wanted to play, but also the guys that played ahead of me were really good.
Yeah.
I never thought they weren't good and it wasn't fair. It was like, hey, I want to play too, but like.
You understood it.
Yeah, I understood. Like, hey, Braylon Addison, Josh Huff, Keenan Lowe, D'Anthony Thomas. These dudes are ballers. Like there was no like politics or anything like that. It was just like I just wanted to get my slice of the pie and I couldn't,
Yeah. Did you ever think about transferring to another school where you could play?
A little bit. It was difficult because I loved Oregon. I loved my teammates, and I also pride myself in kind of seeing things through. Eventually, I did graduate and kind of do a post grad transfer and do my 5th year at USF. It was kind of kind of where I felt like I could be at peace with graduating from Oregon, kind of finishing that journey, then also giving myself one more shot. Mm-hmm. And then after USF, when I kind of like was like, all right, man, you transferred, you still didn't play a lot, still didn't do anything. Like it might be you.
Time for a plan.
Yeah. And so then that was like an interesting period because then after that point, I remember like that was our last game was Thanksgiving, November that year, and then after that it's like, all right, like. Like what do you do? Like
what's next?
Yeah. And I remember I was on my best friend's futon in Oregon in like December that year, just hanging out. I went back to Oregon just to kind of visit some friends and stuff. And I'm like, man, like I've never really thought about it. Like I went to school and got good grades, but like I didn't really have like a career in mind or anything like that.
Right.
And then my older sister kind of helped me, get online and put a little resume together and kind of like get out of that and like, take that next step. But it was definitely like a darker time where I was just kind of like, for the first time in years, even all through college, of course, but even high school, like I don't have anything motivating me. And just know, like, all right, well, you're working for this goal. You're like, okay, that goal is over, and I never really put any thought in any other goals. So it's definitely like a uncomfortable period, and like I'm thankful I had my sister and like my family to help me out. But like I know a lot of former athletes don't have that support system, and then it's like, what do you do? And you can kind of go down a dark hole if you allow yourself.
Yeah, I mean, even some players, even people who do make it, and then when they have to face retirement, they go down that dark hole. It's like, what's next in my life? Even though they might have made a lot of money, and I know there's that whole ESPN show Broke that came out years ago, and that's one of the sadder 30 for 30s I think I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
What some of them have gone through. Did you ever think about just maybe to stay involved in the business, but do coaching or something else that might have opened up other doors?
Yeah, a little bit. I always, even when I did play, I always kind of like had in the back of my mind, like, all right, if I was the coach, like, what would I do here, and like, how would I run my system, and how would I have my culture and my program and all this stuff. And then just like that bitterness of like not being able to make it to the NFL, I akin it to like if you break up with a girl and you kind of have to like unfollow her and like, be single for a while and like you're just like, oh, I don't want to even see her right now. That was kind of like me in football. I was like, man, even though I still love football, I was like, I can't do this right now. I don't want to coach. I don't like coaching was like too close to it, where you're like, man, I'm seeing all these guys that like, whether or not they're better than me or I'm better than them or like whatever I'm thinking, it's just like, oh, it just feels too like it was too raw at the time. So I did a couple of kind of football adjacent things. I did social media for the Bucks that was my first internship for like right out of college for like 6 months. I did a quick scouting internship, and then tried some other kind of non-football stuff. So I was around it, but I was like, I couldn't quite get to coaching. Like it just wasn't quite in my heart. And then kind of interesting enough, Chip Kelly, who was my coach at my coach at Oregon, ended up coaching the Eagles, and he actually offered me a very entry-level position. And it was the week after I started my real estate class.
Oh, wow.
And I told the person who offered me the job, like, respectfully, thank you for offering me this to me, but I kind of want to see this real estate thing through, and I just for some
a real
reason,
defining moment right there.
I kind of could have gone either way. And for me, I think I really value consistency and like community and things like that, and knowing what the coaching life can bring as far as traveling, getting fired and moving year after year, not being around family as much. I kind of was like, I want to maybe establish something a little bit more stable that I have a little bit more control over. And so it was, like you said, a defining moment. And I just said, I'm going to try real estate. And if it doesn't work, maybe I'll call you next season or the season after that. And maybe we can, if you still have a spot for me, I'll start on the very bottom. And so then I kind of went that way and haven't looked back.
That was going to be a spot on his coaching roster?
Just a very low level, like, breaking down film, kind of, they call it quality control. Like you're the lowest guy, you're just earning your way up kind of thing.
Getting the machines to work. And
exactly.
Yeah, I hear you. So what was it about real estate, Eric, that got you interested? Like, is that at all in your family, or what was appealing to you about it?
Yeah, ironically, it is in my family. I wasn't like one of those things where I was like, I kind of knew at the time. My grandfather on my mom's side was a real estate agent.
Okay.
And did very well in Pittsburgh. And kind of looking back at my family tree, a lot of my family members used real estate to kind of improve their lives, as we got out of slavery and things like that, looking back generationally.
Wow.
So it was in our DNA, so to speak. I didn't really necessarily
That's
knew
cool.
that. People are like, oh, it's football's in your DNA. So like, actually, real estate's kind of in my DNA as well.
And real estate goes back even further. It sounds like.
Absolutely. But the thing that kind of got me into it was just like with my mom. Like I said, I would spend a lot of time with my dad doing football stuff, but I'd spend a lot of time with my mom doing mom stuff, doing lady stuff, whatever. And like we would go to open houses on weekends. Just like we had a house, we weren't looking for houses, but she would just like want to see the new trends, want to see what's going on in the neighborhood. So we go to a lot of open houses. And then somewhere along the line, I just kind of like had to develop like a passion for just nice homes and like interior design and like new trends and things like that. And then like around 23, 24, I was like, maybe I could do real estate. And when I first got my license, I wanted to be a house flipper, and that was kind of my thing. Was like, man, football didn't work out. Like I didn't get playing time from the coaches and this, that, and the third. I'm gonna be a house flipper. It's gonna be all on me. I'm gonna do the work, and if I make it, I do. If I turn a profit, great. If not, then it's my fault, kind of thing. Like I wanted that, like all or nothing. And I think God kind of protected me from that. I ended up not really going down that route. It took me like a year or so to kind of see that wasn't just like, not that it wasn't for me, just the doors weren't opening. I was trying to do it. I had some investors. I just couldn't make anything happen.
Couldn't find the right deals.
Yeah, couldn't find the right
deals. It's funny,
deals.
I've actually gone down that path too myself.
Really interesting. Yeah, and then after about a year of kind of not doing anything, I was kind of like, man, I think I need to maybe pivot a little bit, maybe have more of a niche. And I kind of just like thought of this idea of like, all right, like I played football, maybe I could do something with athletes. Like it just got scratching the surface of it.
Sure.
And then shortly thereafter, I met John Fincher, my current business partner, who was also more established realtor at the time.
Okay.
And he was, had a little athlete practice kind of going. And he was like, yeah, actually, I could use a little help and I wouldn't mind teaching you a thing or two. And it was kind of one of those things where I just kind of spoke it. I met John like a week or two after I spoke that thought. Like it was crazy, definitely divine timing. So met him, and then kind of from there, kind of went down this path of like, all right, we're going to primarily focus on representing buyers and sellers, and we're going to put a lot of emphasis on the sports and entertainment kind of clients, while also kind of not neglecting our everyday clients as well, but kind of making that our calling card.
Sure.
And that's kind of another turning point, I guess you could say.
That makes sense. So how long was it, Eric, from when you finished up with school that you went to get licensed in real estate? What was that time period?
Probably a year or so. definitely kind of a blurry period in my life, but I think about a year or so.
So it wasn't that long. It was, pretty.
It felt long at the time because I was like, at one point I was living at home again, so I felt every weekend felt long.
Right.
Every Friday night that I was at my parents' house hanging out, with like not going out and not doing anything fun. It felt like forever.
Yes.
But yeah, I guess it was maybe
They probably felt the same way.
Absolutely.
So that about a year later, you found, all right, I'm going to try this whole realist thing out.
Yeah.
At first, you were thinking you were going to flip homes. Then you got yourself licensed, got hooked up with your boy here, John. You guys are still business partners.
Yep.
So you weren't with Compass right away, or were you?
No, John had his own brokerage, just kind of a small boutique firm, and it was kind of another crazy, just kind of turn of events there. So we were doing that for a little while. He was, had some co-working space around the corner on Henderson or something like that, and then he got a call one day and was like, "Hey, my buddy from Miami is getting ready to go to Compass, and he wants us to come with him." And I'm like, Compass? Who is that? What's a Compass?
Right.
Like, okay, whatever. Like,
What's a Compass?
I had nothing. I was like,
am I going north, east? Where am I going?
I'm like, cool, let's do it. And that was at the end of 2019, and we joined Compass. No, excuse me, that was, get my dates mixed up. That might have been 2018. Can't remember exactly, but like the point being that it was kind of one of those things where we're like, all right, like, let's just do it. And then just kind of slowly but surely, Compass started kind of gaining some steam and some momentum. And that was obviously another kind of pivotal moment for me to kind of align myself with our great brokerage and kind of, learn from a lot of really top producing agents here and like nationwide.
Now, did they have a sports and entertainment division already, or is that something that you guys kind of had to craft out on your own?
Yeah, so they had one at the time, which was very appealing and kind of one of the things that was like, all right, cool, I'm sold. It was in its infancy stages at the time. Ben, who I alluded to, Ben Moss, he's based in Miami. He was the East Coast director at the time. Kofi Narte was the director. Kofi has since kind of done his own thing with his own brokerage, and Ben kind of stepped up and kind of rebranded our sports entertainment division a little bit. But yeah, that's kind of always been a thing. It's grown a lot since 2018 or whatever, whenever it started. Not even before that. But yeah, it's kind of been one of Compass's signature things that's kind of spoken to me for sure.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So, I mean, obviously, there seems to be a perfect blend there of a renewed passion that you had about real estate, right? And figuring out what your niche was going to be in real estate with your connections and your network and the sports side. It makes a lot of sense as to if you can blend those two together, you can build a very successful career, which you've obviously done, and you've been growing it ever since. I think when we featured you, I think if I remember correctly, we featured you as a rising star in the community because you were only licensed for maybe a couple of years at that point, right?
Yep.
And what's been your best year so far, Eric?
Every year it gets a little bit
Has
better.
it been growing year?
Yeah. So this year currently we're tracking to be our best year. Every year we seem to do a little bit better, which is awesome. Kind of going back to like you said about like the relationships and the connections is, I think John may even told me this like a long time ago, but it was like, you do business with people who you know, like, and trust. And so like low hanging fruit was like, all right, people I played with, people I've worked out with, people like my dad, my dad's former players, like it was like they just happened to be sports players or football players or coaches, but it was kind of just like, all right, who's known me the longest, who trusts me as a person, and then will give me a chance to earn their trust as a realtor kind of thing. So just kind of like, for me it was sports, but like for somebody else it may be military, for somebody else it may be teachers or doctors. It's kind of just like what's around you and what kind of makes the most sense,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, for most people that are growing their brand, tapping into their network has got to be the first step, right?
Absolutely.
No matter what that, we just literally had an interview before you got here with Kelly Mothershead up in Pasco County, and she's very active in a lot of the Newport Richie associations and stuff, and a lot of her network and her business has been built that way. So same thing that you're describing. And so for somebody who wants to be, and it sounds like for you, you started getting into this sports and entertainment side pretty quickly, which many people would probably associate that with luxury real estate, right? I know a lot of people that get into luxury real estate, it's hard for them to start that way.
Right.
Many of them have to get to that eventually. What were some of that experience for you? Like, was that a challenge for you to start like learning about representing these $1 million plus assets, and what challenges did that bring?
Yes and no. Like certain standpoints, luxury is just like everything else, but at the same time it's not. It's kind of like an interesting duality. Like to a certain standpoint, it's like, hey, numbers are numbers, and like, things are just, just do the numbers and don't get crazy about them and don't take your emotions out of it. At the same time, a luxury client does expect a certain level of service and a certain level of just how you communicate with them. And some of that just you can only get through experience. So it's an interesting kind of duality. But there was definitely some struggles early. Like you said, a lot of times people kind of grow to luxury, and I kind of was shooting for that off the rip. So it's like, wasn't earning any money, didn't have any money to fall back on, and like, you don't do a luxury sale just like that.
Yeah.
So it was kind of an interesting period where it kind of like, all right, I got to build towards this, but also like, like be patient. And I think that's a big thing too. If you're thirsty is a slang word we use, but if you're desperate for a sale, anybody can sniff that away.
It's a repellent. Yeah.
Anybody can sniff that from a mile away, but let alone somebody who's bought and sold 10 houses in their life. They're gonna be like, oh, okay, get out of here. So you have to be patient and I had for me, I think it goes back to being an athlete too, is like, I had a vision for what I wanted out of my career, and I knew it wasn't going to be overnight. At Oregon, we had a phrase called like water the bamboo, and like the meaning behind that is like bamboo takes like 4 or 5 years to like really grow and mature, but you have to water it every day.
Yep.
And so the same idea. So like if you're a freshman, like you got to like lift weights and run, do all this stuff, but you might not see the results until your senior year kind of thing. And so that was for me. It's like, all right, like I'm 24-year-old luxury real estate agent with no sales, but like. What am I going to be like when I'm 28 or 32 or 35, and like keeping that in mind every day while I was going about and kind of trying to grow my business.
Yeah, it's a huge tip. It's about, there's a great book out there called Atomic Habits that talks about the same concept, right? Of what things are you investing in today that are going to produce fruit tomorrow. That one of my favorite books too that I read years ago is called The Slight Edge, and it's very similar, and it actually uses a lot of illustrations like you just did about the bamboo. To prove to you, even in nature, that so many little things are happening that you don't even recognize or acknowledge, but over time, the accumulation is beautiful.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And it's such a great lesson that I think hopefully anybody can take. Because the other flip side to that is somebody who expects the popcorn success.
Yep.
And then they don't get it right away, and they just stop. Right?
Yep.
Habits stop. They stop working out. They stop reading. They stop doing this or that. And then they're constantly spinning their wheels, and unfortunately, those patterns don't usually work out.
Yeah,
right?
And kind of maybe a blessing in disguise kind of moment. I had a couple opportunities my first year or two in where whether it was a big coach or a player that came in where I thought I had the inside track on this deal, I would maybe be $1 million, multi-million-dollar deal, and kind of take me to another level as a 25-year-old agent, and then it didn't work out where they went a different direction or whatever, and it didn't happen. And you're like, man. But also I think maybe if I would have had that success early, maybe I wouldn't have appreciated it. Maybe I wouldn't have lost some of my habits. So it was like, for a couple of years, it wasn't sexy for a couple of years. It was just, laying the groundwork and just kind of doing the daily action items. And then, one day I turned up 30 years old, and now it's like, oh, he's doing pretty well for himself.
Yeah. It's always funny. There's a famous line I read somewhere. It talks about people who have made it, right? And it's like they're viewed or branded by the outside world as an overnight success. But generally speaking, it's like a quote I saw was, "It took me 40 years to be an overnight success."
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
So it's funny how that works. Do you remember your first deal?
Yes, I do. I definitely remember it. The buyer actually had passed away, but he was a friend of mine. And one interesting part about it was me and him were looking at houses. Again, I was probably 24 years old. We both kind of look how we look. We went to a house I was for sale by owner, and the lady was like, "Oh, like
what are you doing here?"
Yeah, she was like, "Do you have ID? Like, who are y'all?" And like, to an extent, I was a little like, I felt like, "Hey, man, I'm a realtor just like anybody else." But also, I was like, "Yeah, it was two young brothers walking in our house. Like, I get it too." So like, but he bought a house for maybe 120,000, I think it was.
Okay. So he wasn't an athlete.
No, he was just a friend of mine.
Just a friend of yours.
A friend of mine. We worked out together. Just a family friend.
Yeah.
And it just kind of started like that. One of my kind of big breaks, if you will, another family friend, a lady from my mom's book club. Early on, all I would try to do is just try to like meet potential like influential people and just like kind of let them know what I'm doing. So I knew she had the book club like on a Saturday, and I asked if I could go by and just hand out some cards at the end of book club. So I went there, like did my little thing. And at the end, she was like, "Hey, by the way, we're actually thinking about selling our home." And I had no idea. I was like, "Oh, well, cool." Obviously, I helped them, sold it in a couple of days. They were thrilled, helped them buy a house. And at the end of that, like, double transaction, she was like, "That was so great. I'm going to give your information to everybody I know." And she's probably referred me to 4 or 5 other people in her network since then. But it was all just the idea of just like, "Hey, can I hand out some flyers at book club?" And like that turned into probably 6 or 7 deals over a couple of years.
Gotta love moms, right?
So yeah, absolutely.
They always know how to hook it up.
Absolutely.
Whatever they can do to help their babies, they will.
But at the same time, I thought that would have dropped the ball on that first sale. None of that would have happened too.
True.
So
yeah, you got to be ready for it when the opportunity presents
Exactly.
itself, right? What so now that your business has evolved a little bit, you've been licensed now how many years?
About 7 or 8 years, I think.
Okay. When you look back at these last 7 years, like what do you think is one big win that you feel like you've learned that has really accelerated your business and your growth over the last 7 years?
Good question.
Or it could have been a challenge maybe that you had to overcome, and when you did, it really provided some momentum for you in the right way. Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, I had just one situation where a few years back was just still kind of in that upswing of my career and was in a kind of difficult spot financially where I had some money, but my runway was kind of running out. And literally just in the right time, I got at that point my biggest deal ever, and it was from somebody who it was just a God thing, Like I met a family for lunch or dinner like years ago. Hadn't talked to him since, and they're like, "Oh yeah, our nephew sold his company for mega millions, and wants to buy this place. He's already got it picked out." Like it was one of the things where it was by no like nothing I did did I deserve that deal as far as like being a great realtor, but it was just like for whatever reason. And that kind of always just stopped me. Like, if you're doing the right thing, like, I believe, like, God's going to, like, take care of you. Like, even if it's like, hey, like, my last couple dollars here, but, like, it's always, like, right to that point where if you just
timing
trust
is always perfect.
Exactly. So, like, that was one for me where I was like, you know what, like, I could have been stressing this whole time, but, like, thankfully, like, right when I needed it, like, God came through for me. And I feel like if I'm ever in that situation again where I'm kind of getting to that tight, and he's going to come through again. So, like, it gave me some peace to just know that, like, if you're just doing the right thing and doing right by others, eventually you're always gonna be made whole and you're always gonna be good. So that was like a big thing for me.
That's a huge lesson to be learned, because I think it's so easy in a business like real estate to feel like it might be, to question whether you should even be in it, right? Like to think that it might be time to quit. There's got to be something else that maybe is more reliable or secure, especially if you can't pay the bills, that month. I can totally see that. But then, you have that moment, you have that big win, and then things can skyrocket and build momentum, from there, which it sounds like that started to happen with you. And what's really cool with you, and even though for many agents right now, they might be saying that this is a different year for them.
Sure.
The fact that you're having your best year ever, right now, shows a lot about the fact that the relationships that you've been investing in are building and paying off.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, I'm super fortunate to be having a great year, but like if I were to go through my like log of sales every year this year, it's like it's like, oh, okay, this is this relationship started 4 years ago when I helped this guy find a rental, or this happened 3 years ago when I first started meeting this person. It wasn't like out of nowhere to like this year all these $1 million clients came out of nowhere. Right. It was like 4 and 5 years worth of like seeds being planted and starting to harvest. So
consistency is key, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So like anybody who's maybe in a down period right now, like this is the time where you really make it. Like, and especially what I think is really a great opportunity right now is like while the market maybe is slower, this is like a time to double down on your relationships. Like now that you have maybe more time, you should be going out to lunch and dinner and golf and happy hour and whatever else your thing is with all of your past clients and your Sphere members and your people you're trying to get to know. Like you have time to do it now. Like you're not necessarily showing every day right now, or maybe going to open houses all the time because the inventory is lower. So like this is the time to really like enhance your relationships and get to know people and go deeper. And 3 years from now, people are like, "Oh, he's overnight success," but it's like, nah, because you took this time right now to do that stuff. So
it took me 20 years, right, to be an overnight success. What percentage would you say, Eric, of your deals today are in the sports and entertainment world?
Maybe like half of them, maybe a little bit less than half.
Okay, so it's not like that's 100% of your business.
Yeah, no, it's just for every athlete deal, I'm also doing a deal with like a buddy of mine from high school, or like somebody from church, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, makes sense. It's funny too because you've mentioned a few times on this podcast the idea that you were running out of money and that you we're dealing with some of those stresses.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people might think, looking out from the outside, that you would have had a road paved with gold because of your last name and been like, even if he didn't make it right away, his parents will just pay for him. And it doesn't sound like that was your experience. Like you've had to build your own thing and get your own name, and your parents weren't just going to be giving you money because you're their son.
Right. Yeah. I've always just had a desire to kind of build my own name. I'm realistic. I know that my parents would never let me be homeless or anything like that. But like at the same time, I never felt comfortable asking for money or anything like that. And if I ever did, it was like, all right, I got to have a plan of how am I going to pay it back, and like, interest and all this stuff. So like my dad kind of taught me those tough lessons. Like, of course, like he would never let me struggle and be homeless and be starving. But like, if I did borrow money, it was like, all right, how are you paying it back? When's it going to be due? Like, so you always learn those real life lessons. So like, when I was running out of money, like, yes, I'm not like gonna be broke and homeless, but also it's like, I don't want to ask my dad for money because that's embarrassing, like, you know, kind of thing.
Did you ever doubt the process in the last 7 years as an agent and thinking that maybe you made a bad choice or wanted to go somewhere else, or do you feel like you've always been committed to seeing this through?
Yeah, I've always been committed, and like I said, like, I've been just really blessed. I read a book called When God Winks, and the idea of like a God wink is just like, right when you're kind of at a crossroads, you get like a little sign of confirmation that lets you know you're on the right track. And like, whether it was like that sale I alluded to with my friend's nephew that sold the company, or just like different moments along the way where you're like, no, I'm still on the right track. Like, even though I'm maybe in an ebbs and flow, or I'm in a valley right now, like, I'm on the right track. And like, truthfully, like, I really like what I'm doing. Like, if I was selling,
You seem like you're enjoying it.
yeah, if I was, this is not a disrespect to these industries, but if I was selling insurance, if I was selling something that I didn't care about, you know, even commercial real estate, it'd be different, but I really like what I'm doing. So like, I enjoy meeting with my clients. I enjoy looking at the houses with them. I enjoy helping them, you know, market and sell it and stage it. And so it's like, you know, like,
Yeah, no doubt.
yeah.
You have a passion for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think you enjoy the most about it?
That's a good question. I think first and foremost, it's just like the personal like disconnection. Every sale or transaction has its own story. It's so kind of figuring that part out. Like, all right, am I helping like a first time couple find their house that they're going to raise their baby in? Am I going to help all-star football player, you know, find his dream house? Am I going to help somebody has an emergency and needs to sell their house as fast as possible? You know, there's always a different situation. So just kind of being able to like do that. I think that's probably one of the more like kind of rewarding parts of it.
Yeah, every deal I have to imagine is going to be a very different situation. You never know what's going to pop up.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And sometimes, you know, you meet a client and end up being like a lifelong friend. Sometimes it's very business as usual. Sometimes, you know, you start out looking for a rental, end up buying a house, whatever. Just, you never know how it's going to go.
Yeah, no doubt. And we didn't talk, you know, really about numbers, but I was looking before this podcast, and I think this from last year's numbers, right, from 2022, I want to say you were in like the 30-something million range. Does that sound right?
Yeah, correct, yeah.
Right in that ballpark. So, I mean, you were averaging right around about a little less than $1 million, I think, per transaction, as far as what we were looking at. And the fact that you're on pace to do even more than that this year, it shows over time breaking into that top 500, you know, it shows, you know, your commitment to the business.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy you just say some of those numbers kind of out loud. Just like, I remember literally watching like $1 Million Listing look like as like a 24-year-old and be like, if I ever had $1 million sale, I'd be so happy, you know, like this. Man. And that was just a few years ago. And now for you to say that, like, you know, my average is around $1 million that's kind of crazy.
It is, dude. Congratulations. It's been cool to see the journey too. I always ask a couple questions too, just for people who might not know you yet personally, to see if they can get to know. We've talked a little bit about Eric, you know, being brought up, of course, in this area. But what do you love to do for fun now, man? What keeps you busy?
Yeah, I love working out. I'm not like a freak workout guy, but like I've been doing like hot yoga lately. I love bike riding.
Hot yoga? Oh, look at you. Okay.
Shout out to Bella Prana. That's where I go. But yeah, I do the Bikram yoga, and it just kind of gets my body and my mind kind of all balanced. And
you live in Tampa?
I do. Yeah, I live in South Tampa. So I go over on to Bikram. The Bella Prana over on Platte. So that I like to bike ride. I bike Bayshore and Davis Island like pretty regularly.
Cool.
And just being outside, whether that's like eating outside or going on a boat or just like whatever. I just like being in the sun.
Yeah, man. I mean, Tampa is beautiful. You can't go wrong if you're living in South Tampa for sure. And jogging on Bayshore, the views are pretty nice, right?
Absolutely.
So, do you live alone? Do you have a relationship? What's going on that front?
No, I'm currently single.
Okay.
Living alone with my German
Check it out, ladies.
I'm here, man. I'm here. But yeah, no, just currently single. Have my guard dog, my German Shepherd, Bastion. Me and him kind of hold it down.
Do you want a family?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of interesting that progression. I think growing up, I still am pretty independent, but was very independent and wasn't necessarily interested in having a family. And as I've kind of grown up, I think looking back at my family history, looking back at like my mom and dad, their parents, looking back at their whole, you know, legacy and lineage, I'm like really looking forward to in the right time, like having a family and kind of passing down, you know, the family name and just like some of the traits that they've instilled in me. So as I get like older, I'm like really excited about that season of life whenever that happens. Hopefully, you know, sooner than later. But
you're a young guy. How old are you now?
I'm 31, so yeah,
okay.
I've got a couple years.
I got married at 32, just so you know. So
okay, so
right
this time next year, maybe I'll.
You never know. The right woman out there, you just never really know.
Right.
So your parents, it sounds like, have been the 11 siblings. Many of them are adopted.
Yes.
Correct. So what's that been like? I've always admired families that go that route. I have a cousin who has adopted 3 kids from Peru, And I've talked to we have 5 kids, my wife and I, so we've talked about maybe adopting more over time. But right now we have 5 that are all 9 years old or younger. And so our house is a bit of a zoo as we speak currently. But who knows? As they get older, that might be a path that we'd go down. But what was your kind of experience from having these adopted siblings and that kind of a blended family?
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of always been part of my life. Leaving my grandmother, my mom's mom, she fostered over 100 kids in her life. So
Wow.
just something that she always had a heart for that. And then she obviously passed that on to my mom. And like you said, like some of your family members, you have to have the right heart to kind of have that and to kind of, take that on that initiative. But it's been beautiful. And so it's kind of taught me a lot of just about empathy. And as I've gotten older, starting to talk with some of my younger siblings about like their situations, about like where they came from, like as far as like what they don't know and what they do know and how that affects them mentally, just allows me to like just kind of just take a step back and like kind of just see life from different perspectives and kind of be a little bit more empathetic and kind of open-minded and open-hearted, I guess.
Yeah, I can imagine that. What's the youngest age of sibling?
Youngest is 5, so we haven't had those deep conversations yet. And then for the younger ones, it's just about trying to like, just like I said, I'm a more and more independent and kind of to myself, so just kind of like allow me to like try to warm up a little bit and try to like express that part of my life, which I'm still working on that.
Were you involved? I know your dad has an association for kids, doesn't he?
So he's part of Family First, and there's
Family
also like
First,
All Pro
right?
Dad, which is kind of the spin-off of that. So he's involved in that. I've done a couple of things over the years with them, as far as a couple like PSAs and media things and a couple events. But for the most part, that's kind of like his thing for sure.
Yeah. Is there any other organizations or things that you've been a part of, or that's something that you want to be a part of? Anything that kind of tugs at your heartstrings?
I had a foundation that me and one of my plant teammates co-founded. I definitely have to like say that I have a lot of respect for people who can really like operate in that like non-profit charitable space like full time. It's something that we thought we could do kind of on our own on the side while we had our day jobs.
It's a lot of work.
And it was a lot of work, and it ended up kind of we've kind of taken our eye off the ball over it. So we had the right intentions, and we were working with kids at Booker T. Washington Elementary School, but just kind of as work for me got busy, for him as his family grew and got busy, it was a difficult thing to kind of keep up. So I'm hoping I can kind of maybe find another foundation to support, but I'm kind of in between right now as I kind of just rebalance, I guess.
Yeah, man, that's cool. I got a couple rapid fire questions for you. Do you have a favorite book or author or seminar maybe that has made a huge impact on you?
I have a couple of favorite books. I want to definitely like mention Blue Fishing. I think that's Steve Sims. Phil Knight's book Shoe Dog.
Mm-hmm. Did you see that movie?
I haven't seen the movie yet. No, the book was killer though. It was really cool because I went to U of O, like reading all the buildings are all named after these people, like Jaquan and different like Bowerman and Prefontaine, all these guys. But the most impactful thing has been How I Built It podcast. I listened to that probably for a couple years, like every day.
I should probably check that out, huh?
Yeah, maybe. It's NPR, and basically just like it's just about how entrepreneurs built their business. Wherever anybody from like Sarah Blakely to like Logic was on there. Just anybody who built something and knows how they did it, and almost everybody has a similar story of how they started with an idea. They had some ebbs and flows. They had to break through some things and fight through adversity. And I listened to like one episode probably every day from that time when I got licensed to when I actually kind of quote unquote made it. Like as I was just trying to like stay motivated, keep my mind right, and kind of just keep that big picture in mind. So that's the number one thing for me.
It's called How I Built It. Is that right?
How I Built This.
How I Built It. Yeah, I've seen
How I Built It.
It's a podcast that you've listened to. Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah. And there were some really good stories in there and examples. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Do you have a favorite show or movie?
Oh, good question. I don't say I have a favorite. No, I don't think I have a favorite show or movie. My all-time favorite movie is ATL. I don't know why. I watched it when I was in like 7th grade, and I was just
ATL, okay.
Impactful. It's Lauren London and T.I. It's about roller skating in Atlanta.
Never even heard of it.
I just watched it at a young, impressionable age, and I just liked it. It doesn't have any deep story or anything like that. It just was a cool
but it's
movie.
resonated with you ever since.
This is my favorite movie. Like I think whenever you're like in middle school, like whatever you like at that time, it just sticks with you. So I think that's why.
That is true. I've been binging some of this Suits show on Netflix.
Okay,
now.
yeah,
Have
that's
you ever
been on
seen
my
that?
little algorithm or whatever, but I haven't watched it yet. But it looks
It is
cool.
addicting, dude. Once you start it, it's tough to turn them off. Because
Yeah.
you know how Netflix works; they just keep rolling
Yeah.
one episode after another.
Yeah.
But I've been enjoying it. Favorite food?
Ooh, I love Cuban food, so like that, like breaded steak and plantains. Like
There
that's
you
probably
go.
my favorite.
I'm a
favorite
plantain
meal.
fan for sure.
Yeah, that's my number one, plantains. Like if I just, if I was in a dive, or you just were like, hey, we don't know what to get them, some sweet plantains.
That's it, man.
That'll
So
get
if
me
you're a
every
chick
time.
out there who wants to date Eric, take him out for a little churrasco and plantains. Your money. That's the way to go. I love it. Two last questions for you, Eric. So as we, time flies, man. Time flies. I'm glad we were able to have you here, though. This has been fun. When you think about the future, right? Maybe whether you want to say the next 12 months or beyond, what gets you most fired up about like what you're building towards, what you're growing after? What does the vision look like for you?
Yeah,
And it could be personal or professional or both.
Yeah, I have some personal goals. Like I'd like to purchase a home, so that's like something that kind of resonates with me. But then also I like I mentioned, when I first got in the business, I kind of had like a idea in my mind about like kind of how I wanted my business to look. And now that I'm kind of like getting there, that really excites me. And it's not actually like a dollar thing or anything like that. It's just like a quality of life, a clientele kind of thing. And so like as I'm like kind of reaching that point, I'm like, all right, this is the time to like dig in and like really, really go for it. So I'm just excited to kind of build the business and build it like how I want to build it too. Like as far as like, you see me wearing my sneakers, you see me with my hair out. Like I'm not like, I'm good to be myself.
Just being real.
Yeah, and be real. And it's resonated with my clients and with my, my family and friends and things like that. So like, that just excites me,
Yeah, no doubt. Have you been able to tap into some of the Bucks network at all? Do you still work with some of the Bucks players now?
Yeah, I've been fortunate to do some of that stuff with some of the players and coaches. So, I've worked with a couple of the new guys they brought in this off season, and yeah, I'm always kind of
Helping out Baker?
I might have.
That'd be cool to hear. So, what do you think about that quarterback situation? Is it going to be Baker or Trask?
Yeah, that'll be interesting. They're like two great people. I actually know them both as as people. So like two awesome dudes and like very contrasting styles. So not gonna like say who should win or anything like that, but like two good dudes. So like hopefully
Baker seems to be pretty bombastic, right?
Yeah, he's got a very outgoing personality. When you meet him, like he's very personable. Kyle kind of is a little bit more like me, kind of just chilled, laid back. Which so like both cool dudes, and yeah. So we'll see what happens.
So you're cool either way. Whoever wins the job, you'll support, right?
Absolutely, I'll support them, and hopefully they'll lead the team into like another good year, and hopefully like playoffs and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean they still got good players. Last year was disappointing for sure, but hopefully they'll go back where they belong this year, right?
Absolutely.
Last question for you, Eric, is when you think about, and you're a young guy, so this might be a tough question for you, but I always love hearing people's thoughts on what type of legacy they want to leave, right? And as you grow and one day maybe sit in my rocking chair drinking your lemonade, when you think about what you want to be remembered for, what are some of your thoughts that come to mind as far as what legacy would be important to you?
That's a great question. I've been thinking about that recently, and don't have a great answer for you yet. And I say that because for a while, like I said, I just wanted to be an athlete, and I just, that's kind of all I cared about. And then I got into like real estate, and then like as of late, I'm like I really want to like have a family, and like I think that'll be my legacy of like being a great husband and a dad and stuff like that. But as I'm thinking about that, I'm like wondering if that's going to be enough. Like obviously I'm not a dad yet, I'm not a husband yet, but like I'm wondering like, all right, in 30 years, if that's all I am, will I be satisfied? And I don't know. Maybe I will be, but maybe I won't be. Like so, I'm like kind of like on that journey of like trying to figure out like what else is out there and what else is going to like really make me like, like what else I'm going to be passionate about besides maybe just a family. So I don't know exactly what the answer to the question is. I think that's something I'm like in this season of life I'm trying to like discover. And so hopefully maybe next time we talk, I'll have like a really great answer as far as like this is what I'm going for now. So I'm trying to like figure that out and cultivate that and continue to like grow. And hopefully, as I continue to grow, I'll be able to like find that out.
I love that. That's a good segue to invite you on the podcast again.
I'm always trying to invite myself back on,
That's smart, man. Very smart. I love that plug. Eric, if somebody wanted to reach out to you and just pick your brain or connect, what's the best way to do it?
Yeah, Instagram, at Eric Dungy. You send me a DM, I'll hit you back. And I was very fortunate when I first got in the business. So many people offered to take me out to lunch or to let me pick their brain and kind of get me in the game. So anybody, whether you've been in the game or you're young or new in the game, like would love to just, give you whatever knowledge I have and kind of pass that favor on. So yeah, feel free to contact me on Instagram. that's, unfortunately, I'm on it all the time. I wish I wasn't.
More than you should be.
Yeah,
huh?
I wish I wasn't, but that's probably the best way to get me. So would be open to that.
That's awesome. We'll put all of that contact in the description and stuff when we post it up on our YouTube channel. But Eric, it was great to have you here. I love diving into your story a little bit more. I always end every episode with a challenge to anybody who's listening, anybody who watches this over time. If you're going to invest the energy and time into watching the episode, try to take one thing at least from the conversation that you can go ahead and implement into your business or maybe even into your personal life to be able to move it forward in the direction that you want. Maybe it's just sticking with it. You heard Eric talk about the importance of consistency, right? And utilizing some of the mentality that it really, a lot of times people from the outside don't see the results and they won't see the results for a while, but you got to stay true, right, to your plan. And maybe hopefully this podcast showed you that there's a positive side on the other side if you allow yourself to stick with it. Maybe it's tapping into your network. Eric talked about the power of that as to how that helped him as well. Whatever it might be, maybe it's one of the books even that we brought up that you need to pick up and read. But do something, right? Take an action step, move forward in the right direction. And if you do that, I think you'll be glad that you invested the time into listening to this podcast. So we will see you on the next episode of Tampa Bay Real Producers. And stay classy there, Tampa. We'll see you later.